The preliminary autopsy results indicate that Brown was shot twice in the head, 4 times in the right arm, and that all bullets entered from the front. One bullet that entered the top of his skull indicates he was bending forward when it hit him, causing a fatal injury. Also, no gunpowder was found on Brown's body, suggesting he was not shot at close range. This autopsy is one of 3 that will be performed. The state, as well as the Department of Justice, will also have their own examinations.
Autopsy so significant in this case, and joining us to talk about that autopsy, of course, is JSM. He's a scholar of applied forensics at Jacksonville State University, also an author, by the way. That's Joseph Scott Morgan. Let's go through it, all right, Joseph? We have this. This is a mannequin. This depicts the entry wounds and perhaps some re-entry wounds. Why don't you take us through what this shows and what we know? Let's start with the arm first.
Yes. Let's take a look at the hand right here, Joey. One of the interesting insults that's being pointed out by
by insult, you mean wounds? Or
a wound,
okay,
right,
yes.
That Dr. Bodden has pointed out in the autopsy is this interesting little defect that's right here, or insult. It's on the pad of the hand. It almost looks, according to what Dr. Bodden has described, it almost looks like a graze injury, where it doesn't fully enter the hand, but creates this kind of cavitated area on the outside of the hand.
Now, not interrupting, but just by way of clarification, there are a number of other wounds here.
Right.
Are those independent wounds from different shots, or is it the same wound from one shot?
Well, let's step back for a second and think about what Bodden said in his autopsy report. What he said is that we have entry, re-entry, and exit. He's very non-specific about this because this is a preliminary report. Any number of things can happen, and any number of things can happen with posture.
Sure.
The hand can move.
This do we know?
No, we don't know anything definitive yet, but what we do know is that there are a whole variety of insults running up the right arm.
Okay, now with respect to the shots to the head, take us through those, and if we know anything about the trajectory at this point.
Right. One of the things that was pointed out, and I'd like to also point out, that it has been alleged that he was wearing a red Cardinals baseball cap. I'd like to take a look at that cap. What they're saying is that there is an injury to the top of the head, okay?
Yes.
And that this tracks downward, okay, with no exit. And then this interesting injury that insults the right eye, passes through the right eye, down through the right jaw, and re-enters at the right clavicle. This gives us an indication that he's in this attitude, almost bent over.
So Michael Brown is bent over at the time of these shots.
Right.
And are these independent shots? Are we able to determine the head shots? Are they each independent, separate bullets as to the head?
According to what Bodden is saying, these two insults that we see right here, this injury here and this injury here, are 2 separate defects to the head.
Are we able, based upon this, to determine whether they were from the front, the shots, or from the back? In other words, was he running away? Do we know that based upon the autopsy report?
Okay, let's take a look first off at the torso. We have the head and these little satellite injuries right here that could very well be as a result of the bullet fragmenting. These give us the idea that it's a facing injury. With the arm, it's much more difficult to tell because the arm will articulate.
It shifts. It goes around.
Absolutely.
Okay. So based upon that, though, are we able to definitively say whether these shots were from the front or from the back if we know at this point?
At this point, no, we cannot.
Okay. And also, with respect to the autopsy, this is the second autopsy. Now, could the results of Dr. Bodden's autopsy differ from the county's autopsy who did the first autopsy? Could they? Yes, no, and why?
Yes, they could, and let me tell you why. We've got 3 separate medical legal agencies that are going to be involved in this.
The feds are next?
Yes.
Okay.
First, we have the county, all right? They have access to all the evidence. They can match the clothing, all this sort of thing, look for gunshot residue. I take exception with Dr. Bodden because he says there was no gunshot residue on the body. How does he know that? Did he do a GSR kit? Thirdly, we have the feds. They're going to do their own exam. So all the while, we have these different protocols that the body is moving through.
And just quickly, because we have to go, with regard to the actual x-rays, could that change the results of what we know? Dr. Bodden didn't see that. He also didn't see the clothing. How could that change the results?
Huge, Joey. This is a huge piece because you can't fully appreciate the attitude or the relationship of the clothing, the bone structure, everything else, and the wound tracks without proper lighting, like you would have in a funeral home where you did the autopsy, and x-rays.
A lot more to find out.
Yes.
We're just beginning to scratch the surface of this. JSM, Dr. Morgan, as I like to call you, best in the business.